What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock NBA, and I want you to start by turning the clock back to the winter of 1996. Super Mario 64 is the hottest video game, Space Jam is selling out theaters, and No Doubt's third album, Tragic Kingdom, is at the top of the Billboard charts. And although a lot of people expected them to be nothing more than one-hit wonders, they were anything but. In fact, they went on to sell over 20 million albums, win 2 Grammys, and honestly jump-started the entire third wave ska craze of the late 90s and early 2000s. And Gwen Stefani ended up being arguably the single biggest star out of the entire 90s alternative music scene. Like, even my 40-year-old sister-in-law from Vietnam knows this one. So how did they do it? How did they go from being a little garage band in Anaheim that just couldn't catch a break to one of the biggest bands on the planet? And what was going on behind the scenes that left them on the verge of breaking up so many times throughout their career? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please check me out on Twitch. I'm live streaming twice a week from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. We like to have fun on this channel, but you know what is not so fun? Dealing with doctors, sitting in waiting rooms and co-pays and insurance forms and blah, 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 blah. It is the absolute worst, right? So for all my guys out there dealing with hair loss, let me tell you about Roman and their solutions for hair loss. And don't get me wrong, the world is full of handsome bald heads, but that doesn't have to be you if it's not your style. Roman offers prescription and over-the-counter treatments delivered right to your front door with fast, free shipping, so you don't have to wait to start fighting hair loss. The sooner a person starts treatment for hair loss, the easier it is to keep the hair that they have. And some guys are even able to regrow the hair that they lost. For a lot of men, losing their hair can also mean losing their confidence. If I'm being honest, that was actually kind of true for me. So whether you are rocking a buzz cut, the gent man bun, or the butt rock faux hawk, you can find hair loss treatment to keep your style the way that you want. So if you want to check it out, go to ro.co/rock. Or hit the link in the description of this video. If approved, you'll get your first month of treatment for free, plus free 2-day shipping. That's ro.co/rock. Once again, that's ro.co/rock. The first time that I heard No Doubt was sometime in 1995 when Just a Girl was hitting MTV and alternative rock radio. But what I didn't know was that the band had technically been around for almost a decade at that point. Originally started by Gwen Stefani's older brother Eric. Starting from their childhood, he was obsessed with making music and would force her to sing along with the songs that he wrote. The first song they made together was actually called Stick It in the Hole. But get your mind out of the gutter, the song is about a pencil sharpener. Shame on you. And as they got older, into their teenage years, somewhere along the way they discovered the two-tone ska scene of the 80s with bands like Madness, The Specials, and The Selector, and they fell in love with it.
The first time I heard about ska music was because my older brother came home with this Madness record. It just kind of took over.
And although Gwen didn't really have any ambitions of being in a band, much less the global pop icon that she would end up being, Eric persuaded her to become part of the band that he was putting together in 1986. They decided to call the band No Doubt, based on their other singer, John Spence's favorite phrase. And this was full-on ska with the horn section and everything.
The start of the night brings about a different life in the onslaught of
The next member to join was the bassist Tony Kanal, who would end up dating Gwen shortly after he joined the band. And even this early in the band's career, their future was uncertain. John Spence tragically took his own life 4 days before Christmas in 1987, and it nearly broke the band. They lost their singer and one of their best friends. That's something that would destroy most bands, and obviously for understandable reasons. But in a decision that would go on to change all of their lives forever, they decided that John would have wanted them to continue, so they kept the band together. Next, they added Tom Dumont on guitar, who was really more of a metal guy. He didn't really know too much about punk or ska or any of that. Then Adrian Young on drums, and that completed the classic No Doubt lineup. They started playing local shows in the LA and Orange County area, eventually drawing hundreds of people and building up their fan base one show at a time. And they were still a small band, but a new label called Interscope obviously saw some potential in the band because they noticed noticed what No Doubt was doing and signed them in 1991. And this was the break that they'd been looking for. They were finally signed to a real label who would send them to a real studio. And so they released their first album called No Doubt in March of 1992, featuring the single Trapped in a Box with a video that they funded themselves.
Trapped in a box, I'm not alone. I know of others with a box of their own.
But unfortunately, this is where they suffered their second big defeat as a band. To put it bluntly, the album flopped. To give you an idea of exactly how hard it flopped, when they were pitching the album to the legendary LA radio station K-Rock, the program director's feedback for them was, it would take an act of God for this band to get on the radio. The biggest problem for No Doubt is that the album came out right as Nirvana and Pearl Jam were blowing up. Everybody was looking for the next dark, brooding grunge band that could be Nirvana or Alice in Chains, not some upbeat, high-energy ska band from Orange County.
Grunge was exploding, and we were the furthest thing from it. Like, we had nothing to do with that whole scene.
Nirvana was peaking. Nobody wanted to hear No Doubt music. It was totally uncool.
And so after basically face planting, the label pretty much abandoned them. As Gwen said, it was almost like an independent release anyway. There was no push for the record by Interscope and no kind of support at all. Everything we did on that record, we did ourselves. But they were able to get some tour support, so they went out on their very first US tour. They somehow managed to fit all 7 band members as well as 5 crew members into 2 vans, where they spent the entire tour pretty much living off of gas station food and sleeping on the floor of the van. And as you might expect, the shows were not exactly packed, and so after 7 years of putting their heart and soul into this band, the future was looking pretty grim. And with such an underwhelming response to the first album and the tour, they weren't even sure if Interscope was going to put out their second album. But still, even with all of that going on, No Doubt was not ready to give up, so they kept going. First of all, they built their own recording studio, which is kind of an exaggeration. It looks like it was really more like a garage with some secondhand recording gear that they managed to scrap together. But they decided if Interscope wasn't going to put out their next album, they were going to do it themselves, which they did. In 1995, they released their second album independently outside of their contract with Interscope, called the Beacon Street Collection.
Open the gate up. Open the gate up. All right.
And you can hear that even if that first album maybe didn't set the world on fire, the band had gotten a lot better since then and started to incorporate more of that rock kind of sound that you would hear on Tragic Kingdom. And if this sounds like Tragic Kingdom to you, that's because all of these songs were actually outtakes from those sessions. And so finally, something happened that gave them the label support that they so desperately needed. Based on the sales of the Beacon Street Collection and their obvious improvement, they signed to an imprint or kind of sub-label of Interscope Records called Trauma Records. And Trauma was blowing up at the time because they had just put out the first Bush album. And with Trauma using those resources to give No Doubt a real push, they had new momentum. But once again, as seems to be the case at every step of No Doubt's career, there was trouble behind the scenes. First up, the founder of the band, Gwen Stefani, quit. He had gotten frustrated with the label politics and with other people trying to tell him what to do with the music, so he quit to pursue his career in animation, working on The Simpsons. Pretty cool story to tell at parties, right? Like, oh, I quit No Doubt to work on The Simpsons. And second, Gwen Stefani and Tony Kanal broke up after 7 years together. And you can imagine the stress that that put on the band. Like, imagine not just being in a band with your ex, but having to like tour in a van with them right after a fresh breakup. That was 2 huge blows to the band in less than a year. But again, they chose to keep going where most bands wouldn't. And all of that perseverance was about to pay off when they released their third album, Tragic Kingdom. But of course, they didn't know that at the time. In fact, they were actually assuming that this was probably going to be the end of the band.
We just figured we're going to put this out, it's going to fail commercially like the first one did, and then we're going to finish college and go on with our lives.
And maybe because of that, they went into it with just a total blank slate, because why not? What do we have to lose? As Gwen said, we got this ambition to not be a quote-unquote ska band, because it was always this label that was put on us, and it was always our goal to have our own sound. And the song that blew the band up was exactly that. Just a Girl was written by Gwen and Tom, and it really sounds like it. Because as opposed to the fairly straightforward ska stuff of the band's early years, Just a Girl was almost like metal meets new wave, like Gwen and Tom put together. The song got some local radio love in Southern California, then slowly but surely made its way to national radio and MTV, eventually hitting number 10 on the Billboard charts and getting them on Conan O'Brien. And with that, No Doubt had officially arrived. And so, capitalizing on the momentum of the song, they immediately went out on tour with Bush. Remember, they were on the same label. And at the time, Bush was by far the bigger band, really at the peak of their hype. This is also where Gwen met Bush's singer Gavin Rossdale and they started dating. And I have to say, looking at the footage of them together now, honestly, it's just unfair how good looking the two of them are together. I am angry. But what really put No Doubt over the edge was their third single, Don't Speak. Just a Girl was a hit song in the context of like alternative rock radio, but Don't Speak was on a whole other level. Like that was a major crossover hit. I worked at Office Max back then, and I remember them playing it in the store all the time. Like that's how big that song was. But again, there was even more tension behind their success. The song itself was about Gwen and Tony's breakup, which had created some conflict, but they were more or less able to manage. But the video was about another source of tension that was causing even bigger problems in the band. That the media was increasingly treating No Doubt like it was Gwen's solo project and basically just ignoring the rest of the band. It wasn't Gwen's fault, and everybody knew that, but still, they didn't try to hide their feelings about it, to the point where they were rumored to be on the verge of breaking up over it.
We got the call, Spin wants to do a cover story. You know, we were all really excited. Another milestone for us. But then the word came back, well, they don't want you guys on the cover, they just want Gwen.
But they held it together, and the album was quickly certified double platinum. And No Doubt were stars. They toured relentlessly for the next few years before returning to the studio, and in April of 2000, releasing their second album, Return of Saturn, with the lead single, Ex-Girlfriend. And after having such massive success with Tragic Kingdom, they were under massive pressure to deliver with this one. It debuted at number 2 on Billboard and proved that they weren't just a one-hit wonder. And it also got good reviews. It was somewhat darker than Tragic Kingdom, and for me, as somebody who listens with, I think, more of like a pop ear, I didn't personally like it as much, but I do think that it's objectively a really good album. And Gwen also continued her rise as a solo artist, doing features on 2 massive songs. First, Southside with Moby, and note that this is before Moby completely embarrassed himself by pretending to date Natalie Portman. And she also did Let Me Blow Your Mind with Eve, which was one of the biggest songs of the year. Gwen Stefani was already a rock star, but with that, now she was a pop star. And so the narrative of Gwen pulling away from No Doubt only got stronger. But with that said, No Doubt was still very much a band, and they proved it by coming back with another album just a year later called Rock Steady, which I personally think is arguably their best album. Because in a way, I think it kind of combines all of the different influences and roots that they have. Ska, pop, new wave, a little bit of metal, but in a way that felt very fresh and new and modern for the time, not just a rehash of the past. And I think part of the reason why it felt so fresh is that they worked with a wide range of new producers on this one. For example, like Neptunes and Timbaland on the hip hop side, Sly and Robbie, as well as some other people on the like dub and reggae side of things, and even Rick Ocasek of The Cars. In an interview before the album came out, Tom said, "This is going to be the most adventurous and eclectic No Doubt album yet. So far, it sounds like a heavy synthed out dub dancehall disco party." And I think that is pretty much 100% right. That's exactly what the album sounds like to me. It's honestly just a fucking great album, and it sounds kind of weird to say given how commercially successful it is, but I actually think it's kind of underrated in the sense that although I think probably everybody knows these songs, I don't really hear people talk about it as the masterpiece that, in my opinion, it is. And it had several just absolutely huge hit songs like Hella Good and Hey Baby, but the biggest song was Underneath It All. And there's also this narrative about No Doubt that they sold out by like abandoning their ska roots, but I just don't think that's true at all, especially not after you listen to this album, because this is their most ska, dub, and reggae influenced album since their debut, and like I said, they worked with some just legends in the genre, and it put that sound on mainstream radio in a way that I'm not sure really anybody else has before or since. The album ended up hitting number 9 on Billboard, they played the Super Bowl, they won a Grammy, and and Gavin Rossdale and Gwen got married. All in 2003. Not a bad year, right? With that said, it was also obvious that Gwen had just gotten much bigger than the band. She was like a huge pop icon, like really just one notch below people like Britney Spears. And so in 2004, No Doubt went on hiatus, and all of them just kind of did their own thing. Tom did a project called Invincible Overlord. Adrian played with some bands like Bow Wow Wow and Unwritten Law. Tony produced a couple songs for Pink, and Gwen's star rose to a whole new level. She launched her clothing brand Lamb in 2003 with a line of handbags, and shortly after that, she also put out her first album, Love Angel Music Baby, in 2004, which I personally thought was a fucking great pop album, and once again had several just monster singles, most notably Hollaback Girl. She had been a style inspiration for a long time. You would see her on the covers of all kinds of women's magazines for it. But this is when her influence on fashion hit a whole new level, getting a lot of mainstream people into the Harajuku Japanese street fashion kind of aesthetic.
It gave Gwen a chance to put her famous fashion sense to work as she launched her own clothing line, Lamb.
I think I've been designing my whole life.
And now is probably a good time to go a little bit deeper into the topic of Gwen versus the rest of the band, because now is when that became just really obvious, in case it wasn't already. On the one hand, of course, I understand why it'd be frustrating to the rest of the band and to some of the fans who felt like they weren't respected or valued enough, because I'm sure I would feel the same way if I was in their shoes. But it's really kind of the same situation as with Hayley Williams and Paramore. Both of them are just super charismatic people with obvious star power, super recognizable, like you could pick them out from across a football stadium, and extremely good looking. So as much as I understand, it's also like, how could you join a band with one of these people and expect it to be anything other than that? And as frustrating as it must have been for the rest of the band, Gwen and Hayley are also the reason why those bands exploded the way that they did. And you can't really have one without the other. And in the case of Gwen and Hayley, I think both of them handled it as well as you possibly could. They always tried very hard to be respectful to their bands, and I think you really can't fault either of them for being stars. And so the band remained on hiatus / broken up for most of the mid-2000s, and I'm not really sure exactly what prompted it, but the band did get back together in 2008 for a reunion tour and released their last album, Push and Shove, in 2012, which I thought was certainly a good album, but for whatever reason, nothing on there really grabs me. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing really right with it either, which I think is how most people feel about it. And actually listening to how Gwen Stefani talks about it, it sounds like her heart wasn't really in it, which is what it sounds like. And once again, Gwen hit a whole new level of stardom when she joined The Voice in 2014 as a coach, getting in front of tens of millions of people every week when that show hit the airwaves on NBC. The band quietly went on hiatus again in 2013, and aside from a few benefit shows here and there, they've been pretty quiet since about 2015 or so. And whenever they're asked about it, they've been pretty clear that there are no plans for a reunion, so unless something changes, and it doesn't seem like it would, it sounds like No Doubt is officially broken up. And so the last question is, what is their lasting influence and legacy? Well, it's kind of interesting to me because for a band that had just massive commercial success and also produced so much really great music, I don't really hear them brought up that much in the same way as I do their peers like Green Day, The Offspring, or even Rancid, when I think they honestly should be, because the band is pretty great. And I know that a lot of ska purists are going to get upset with me for saying this because I guess No Doubt are considered traitors to the ska scene or whatever, but I think you have to give them a lot of credit for inspiring the late 90s wave of ska punk, because the truth is that they were the most well-known band from that scene by just a massive margin, and it's not even close. And last but definitely not least, they just seem like really nice people. I would have them over for a barbecue. So if anybody from the band is watching, you're invited. And if you have never given the No Doubt discography a listen, now would be a great time to do that. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. And I would like to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts a week early. There are members only channels in my Discord that I'm super active in. I do giveaways sometimes, and there's a way to have me review your music. music. If you want me to check something out, every month I do a call for submissions. All you need to do is drop it in the comments of that post, then I will review it live on Twitch. So if that sounds cool to you, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.